Well, now you've done it. You've angered the beast. The Buckeyes are back for more. Let's take a look at Ohio State. Before we get into the Buckeyes Revenge Tour, just a reminder to hit subscribe, ring the bell to stay notified so you're all up to date on everything going on in this channel, all Big Ten, all the time. Season previews, game reactions, even some live streams coming up. Hit subscribe to be in the know of all things Big Ten Tech. Now let's get into the Buckeyes. You made them mad, and now they think winning the Rose Bowl is a consolation prize, and it's a regression. Okay, let's talk about Ohio State. This is a team a year ago that was super talented, but they just had a couple of things wrong, and it was those couple of things that reared their ugly head in those losses. Now, how do you replace Chris Olave? How do you replace Garrett Wilson? Around 1,900 yards receiving, in the 20s in terms of receiving touchdowns. How do you replace that? Well, you replace it with recruiting some of the best wide receivers in the country year after year after year after year. Let's take a look first at maybe, just maybe, the best wide receiver in the United States of America, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Here's something you may have not have known. Despite Olave and Wilson, he was the leading receiver on this team in yards by a lot, by about 500 or 600 yards. Jaxon Smith-Njigba last season, 1,606 yards. Now, he didn't score as many touchdowns as Wilson or Olave, but now he's probably going to score a lot of touchdowns if that Rose Bowl game is any indication. Look, this guy can do it all. This guy's the next great Ohio State wide receiver, and because of who he has on other sides of the formation at wide receiver, I think he's going to get a lot of favorable matchups from defenses. Let's talk about those other wide receivers. First, Marvin Harrison Jr. Been watching some other previews. Some people say he's going to leap over Jaxon Smith-Njigba as wide receiver one when all is said and done this season. I don't know about that, but he is pretty damn good as well. I don't think I'm creating any controversy here saying Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jaxon Smith-Njigba, the best wide receiver combo in the Big Ten. They might be the best wide receiver combo in America. Now, those two guys alone, you say, well, how do I match up against them? Who do I double cover on all that? Well, now you just go down the list and you look at the number one wide receivers in their two respective high school recruiting classes. Let's start with Julian Fleming, the top wide receiver in the 2018 high school class, the number 2 overall player. Number 2 overall player that year. 5 receptions in the Rose Bowl. So you got to think, once Wilson and Olave kind of went and opted out of the game, he kind of stepped up and had a bigger role in that Rose Bowl game. He's going to get targeted. You look at a guy like Emeka Egbuka, as well as their 191 receiving yards, was very involved in the return game as well. He was the number 1 wide receiver in his class as well. These are very, very talented guys at wide receiver. This is the best America has to offer. You line up those 4 guys in the formation, I don't know who you cover. Defense going to be scratching their heads because any one of those 4 guys can take the top off the defense, can run a slant, catch it, and run 70 yards for a score. Every one of those guys is supremely talented. Now, there's one guy in here that I didn't mention. And, CJ Stroud, Heisman runner-up last season. And this passing game really overshadowed what happened in the running game. Let's take a look at the running game. TreVeyon Henderson, this was his true freshman season. 1,248 yards, 15 touchdowns on the ground. Any other place and he'd be the focal point of the offense. Literally any other school. 312 yards, 4 touchdowns receiving to go along with it. 19 touchdowns from scrimmage, and he was playing high school ball last year. Well, 2 years ago. You get the idea. So here's kind of something to keep in mind with guys like Henderson and Smith-Njigba. I think Stroud is going to be really good again, but it would not surprise me to see guys like Jaxon Smith-Njigba and TreVeyon Henderson elevate their Heisman candidacy. Now, because CJ Stroud is playing with them, that's going to make them better. But I look at specifically TreVeyon Henderson. When all is said and done, he could be one of the best running backs in the Big Ten Conference this season. There is no doubt in my mind that that is the case. We'll see how this offense evolves as the year goes along. They're going to have a fantastic passing attack, but I could very well see TreVeyon Henderson rushing for 1,500 yards and 20 touchdowns. And now he's in the Heisman conversation right there. So just some things to keep an eye on offense. This is some of the best talent I've ever seen an Ohio State offense have. And there's been a lot of really talented ones, especially since Urban Meyer came on campus. So in the last 8 to 10 years, there's been so much talent that's progressed through Columbus. This might be the most talented team from top to bottom that I've seen. So let's move to defense. Defense was kind of the weak point at times. Remember those Oregon games, that Michigan game, those 2 losses? They couldn't stack up front. Their rush defense was weak in those games, and they just kept running it and running the opposing team, kept pounding it and pounding it and pounding it, and Ohio State just got run over in those 2 games. So you got to bolster things. Jim Knowles comes in as defensive coordinator from Oklahoma State. That defense has been built up over the last few years. Now he brings a transfer, Jim Knowles brings a transfer with him. Tanner McAllister in the defensive secondary. Really like this pickup at safety. It's going to bolster that pass defense. 78 tackles, 10 pass breakups, 3 tackles for loss in the last 2 years at Okie State. So I think that's a big addition to the secondary. I'll get back to the secondary in just a moment. Let's talk about this defensive line. A lot of people, national media types, saying this is going to be a top 10 type of defensive line. It's kind of hard, like, how could you say that defending, this was not a good run defense last year. It's kind of hard to say that following that. But if you look a little bit deeper at this talent coming in, you're like, oh, yeah, okay. That defensive line, a lot of youth last year, a lot of freshmen in there. I look at Jaxon. He was the top 5 in his class in 2021. 3 sacks last season. Now, because of all the talent, we'll see where some of these guys fit in the rotation. Zach Harrison, 2 sacks, 6 tackles for loss in 2021. Tyler Williams, 5 sacks in 2021. He was a freshman All-American. When I look at all the guys on the defensive line, it's probably him. It's probably Williams that's going to be one of the best on that team. That's going to be able to get into the backfield and create pressure. Javonte Jean-Baptiste is another guy. This is going to be a really good pass rush. We'll see how the interior of the D-line is. They're going to a 4-2-5 scheme now under Jim Knowles. But this is going to be a great pass rush because of just guy after guy. It's kind of like the offense with wide receiver. Guy after guy after guy after guy. You can rotate a bunch of them in there, and they're all as good as the other. So this is going to be a really good pass rush. And I'm not saying any one of these guys is going to be a Chase Young or a Bosa, but, man, you got a cluster of guys right now that are really good on that defensive line that are going to wreak havoc. Their teams are going to have to bring extra tight ends, extra backs in to try to protect against this pass rush. Linebacker, Tommy Eichenberg. People are talking about stuff in the secondary, and hey, Tommy Eichenberg just stuck there in the middle at linebacker. Second on the team in tackles last year, 64, old reliable, kind of right there in the middle. And as we're talking about linebacker, don't be surprised if true freshman CJ Hicks gets some looks and a decent amount of playing time as the season. 5-star guy, number 2 linebacker in the 2022 class, 6'3", 215. Big guy, can move around, play the run. Really like what CJ Hicks brings to the table. He jumps off the film. Gonna wrap things up with Denzel Burke, right? I think he's one of the better corners in the Big Ten Conference. Last year, freshman season, freshman All-American, 3rd-team All-Big Ten, 13 passes defended and 36 total tackles. Denzel Burke, Tanner McAllister, those are going to be 2 really good guys back there in that secondary. This is going to be an improved Ohio State defense. I'm not sure if they're going to get run over like they did a year ago. They've beefed up their personnel. They've beefed up their physicality. And the pass rush is going to be better. I'm just not sure how much better. It's going to be better. Just how much better is the big question in Columbus, Ohio. I went into last year. In the last couple of years, it seems like it's Ohio State and everybody else. And then Michigan did what they did. There's a lot of good teams in the East Division, but I just scratch my head right now thinking, how do you match up against Ohio State's offense? How do you match up against all that talent? And in today's day and age, with transfer portal additions, every single one of all the big names. Well, I won't say every single guy. All those big names, the Strouds, the Hendersons, the receivers. A lot of these guys were recruited to Ohio State. So these are guys that Ryan Day and this coaching staff identified out of high school, top-ranked guys, and they went out and got them, and they stayed here because they know just how good of a system they have here at Ohio State. I want to hear what you guys have to think about the Buckeyes. Are they that much higher above than the rest of the teams in the East Division and the rest of the Big Ten? Or are we going to see something like last year? Are we going to see a Michigan, or are we going to see somebody else pop up and maybe defeat them? They've got a tough schedule, right? Along with the East Division teams, they still got to play Iowa. They got to play Wisconsin. This is not going to be an easy schedule for the Buckeyes. So leave your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all the time. I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.